Hello and welcome. You're watching Eye on Africa on France 24. I'm Nadia Massi. Here are the headlines on the continent this Tuesday. Nigeria slaps fresh sanctions on the military junta in Niger as it says all options are on the table to restore President Bazoum to power nearly 2 weeks after the coup d'etat. Despite an opposition boycott, voters in CAR overwhelmingly endorse a new constitution, paving the way for President Touadera to run for a third term. And we get reaction from Rwanda to a UN court decision to indefinitely halt the trial of Felicien Kabuga, an alleged financier of the 1994 genocide. First then, it's been nearly 2 weeks since the coup d'etat in Niger, and neighbour Nigeria says all options do remain on the table to restore the democratic government. President Bola Tinubu and the West African body ECOWAS had threatened military action if President Bazoum was not reinstated as Niger's leader. But he still remains under de facto house arrest at the presidential palace, and the deadline for his release expired on Sunday. So this Tuesday, it still remains unclear whether regional countries do intend to use military force, but they are continuing to isolate Niger economically, with Nigeria imposing fresh sanctions. For some reaction to those sanctions and a look at what may lie ahead for Niger, here's the analyst Annalise Bernard speaking to our producer, Camina Delic.
This is the thing that needs to be done in order to make it clear that the US, the West, ECOWAS does not respect an overthrow of constitutional order. These sanctions are important in that regard. And if this is the only way that this junta is going to understand that this is a serious violation of democratic norms and of the people's will, then these sanctions obviously need to remain. So I think what we should anticipate is that if there's no backing down, back-channel dialogue will continue between both ECOWAS and other partners like the US with these junta leaders. We know those conversations are happening. The sanctions will come to a point where it will force these people to the table for sure. So it just might not be something we see in the next couple of days, but in theory, this should bring people to the table over at least the next week or so.
Going back to ECOWAS, it does have a history of military intervention in coup-stricken countries, but it hasn't intervened in Mali, Guinea, or Burkina Faso. So why Niger and why now?
Despite what the junta has said out loud, Niger has actually experienced increased stability since Bazoum took office, both due to the counterinsurgency tactics that the Bazoum administration had been implementing in Tillaberi and Difa, respectively, where you have both of these terrorism crises, the Lake Chad Basin Boko Haram crisis, and of course, the crisis in the Sahel. And the security forces had actually been able to really conduct appropriate levels of force protection, securing the population and repelling jihadist threats across the border. So I suspect that the difference here and the reason there was this levying of a threat of use of force was because this really was the violation of the constitutional order, a violation of the will of the people in many ways. That said, what we have seen in the past week since the coup actually took place is an interesting level of popular support surrounds the junta leaders, the CNSP, that makes it seem like any kind of use of force militarily by ECOWAS or anyone else would not be received well and would, if anything, inflame the tensions that are clearly brewing at the civil society level of this anti-European, anti-Western, and certainly anti-colonial trend line. So I think, a couple days ago, we saw the potential for ECOWAS vis-a-vis Nigeria to actually do this and move forward a potential intervention. I don't know if that's going to happen in the future. I think we're back to the table with intense, both back channel and front channel negotiations.
And what does the worsening security situation in the Sahel mean for the rest of the region? Is there a threat for spillover?
Absolutely. Spillover from jihadist threats that are staging out of the central Sahel. So the Liptako-Gourma region that hugs the tri-border of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Those threats, which started there in around 2015 or started to get more violent in 2015, have in the past year, namely since 2020 very actively spilled over into coastal West Africa. Jihadist threats, both violent attacks and also active recruitment at the local level, has been taking place in Benin, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire since at least 2019 and 2020. And in the past few weeks, we've also seen indications that there is more jihadism recruitment taking place in Ghana itself as well in the north. So if Niger does collapse or becomes an impermissible and non-reliable partner for Western counterterrorism partnerships, including ECOWAS, then I think we should anticipate that these jihadist groups will much quicker have the ability to expand across the sub-region even faster. And the more scary piece is that we've been saying for years that we're worried that the Sahel-based jihadist groups would eventually connect with the Lake Chad Basin jihadist groups. We never actually saw evidence of that. And I suspect that part of the reason for that was because there's been such a strong counterterrorism presence in Niger and Nigeria, respectively. If Niger, again, like I said, becomes a less reliable counterterrorism partner due to this junta, we should expect that those jihadist groups might actually start to connect. And once they connect, that'll be a very formidable foe that is much more challenging to unseat once it actually lodges in place.
The thoughts there of the analyst Annelise Bernard. Now, in other news, voters in the Central African Republic have overwhelmingly approved a draft constitution that paves the way for President Faustin Archange Touadera to seek a third term in office. His opponents say he wants to be president for life. They boycotted the referendum. Our correspondent, Justice Bazoum, has more.
On July 30, citizens of the Central African Republic went out to vote in a referendum for a new constitution. According to data from the National Elections Authority of the country, the referendum recorded more than 60% voter turnout. Out of this, more than 90% of the people who voted opted for a yes to a new constitution that removes presidential term limits and increases the term from 5 to 7 years. The ruling party that urged its supporters to vote for yes has been hailing the results from this referendum.
C'est le peuple qui majoritairement a dit oui au projet présenté par le gouvernement. C'est ça la règle de la démocratie. On voudrait que si la majorité emporte, tout le monde s'incline. Et donc c'est une décision qui émane du peuple. Moi-même, personnellement, je suis très content.
This new constitution also bars people with dual citizenship from taking part in the race for the supreme magistracy in the country. Main opposition groups and parties in the country had asked their supporters to boycott the elections and have said that they won't recognize its results now that they are out.
Ce résultat est attaché beaucoup d'irrégularités. D'irrégularités en ce sens que même le processus a été biaisé au début. Parce qu'il nous faut d'abord une chambre sénatoriale afin de bien mettre en œuvre les démarches qui vont se suivre pour arriver au référendum.
Those who disagree with this result have the option of raising it at the country's constitutional court. Were this to happen, the apex court of the country would have 15 days to make a decision.
Justice Bazoum for us there. Now, survivors of the 1994 Rwanda genocide have criticised a UN court ruling that Felicien Kabuga should be urgently considered for release. Kabuga is alleged to have financed and encouraged the ethnic massacre via a radio station he owned. UN judges took that decision on Monday following Kabuga's diagnosis with severe dementia. He is now unlikely to be prosecuted. Our correspondent, Clement Di Roma, has been getting some reaction from Kigali.
Felicien Kabuga, the presumed financier of the genocide against the Tutsis, had previously been deemed unfit for trial by the UN court handling his case. The prosecutor had lodged an appeal seeking a revival of the trial. However, on Monday, the appeals chamber decreed an indefinite halt to the proceedings because he had been diagnosed with dementia. The judges are now considering releasing Kabuga, who had eluded justice for 26 years before being apprehended in France in 2020. The disappointment among Survivors Association and Rwandan authorities is profound.
Pour nous, c'est vraiment l'injustice totale. For us, it's really a complete injustice, which didn't take into account the victims. They completely ignored the victims who lost their relatives during the genocide perpetrated against the Tutsis. It's regrettable to see the court release a dangerous man like Felicien Kabuga.
Kabuga is currently held in a UN detention facility in the Netherlands, awaiting a new assessment that will determine his potential release. In Rwanda, the Ibuka Association filed a complaint to seek financial compensation from Kabuga, known for his substantial wealth and rumored property holdings in the country.
Now, at least 16 people have died in shipwrecks off the coasts of Tunisia and Western Sahara this week. Dozens of others remain missing and unaccounted for. Their nationalities are not currently known. The migrant route from North Africa to Europe is the deadliest in the world, and there has been a rise in attempted crossings this year. Indeed, in recent weeks, the Tunisian government has come under particular criticism for pushing migrants towards its desert borders with Libya and Algeria. Shirley Sitbon has the report.
They have walked through several countries and reached Tunisian port cities, hoping to make the perilous crossing to Europe. But now they face another threat, the desert. Stopped by Tunisian security forces, these women, men and children were taken to the other side of the border and left with no food or water.
They deport us from Sfax to desert. We are here now without no solution. People are suffering. Some people are sick. We ask them for solution, no solution. Every day they come with weapons for us. We are not fighting. We are just a migrant.
For Tunisia, taking undocumented migrants to neighboring countries, either Libya or Algeria, is perfectly legitimate. The government says it has no means to take those migrants in, and it has sealed a deal with the EU to limit the number of boats crossing the Mediterranean. Europe says the goal is to save lives and limit human trafficking. But migrants are left stranded. Under scorching heat at daytime and cold temperatures at night, several have died.
The number of deaths varies from day to day. There were 2 bodies yesterday and 5 bodies the day before, including a child and his mother. The others were men.
The UN has called on Tunisia to end these operations and protect the migrants arriving in the country.
And that report by Shirley Sitbon brings us to the end of this Eye on Africa programme. Thank you for watching.